Never have I actually thought Trump was my daddy. And Kamala is not our mommy. Now, I realize Drew Barrymore has an effed up mom who put her into the spotlight at this young age and let her do drugs and drink when she was, I think, in the single digits, or like 12 at the oldest. That's a sickness, right? She's platformed these people. She leaned in and woke. Now she wants to get away with on Bill Maher. If you've changed, then own that. Own how you've changed, how you've seen the error of your ways. You won't be kneeling down to the transgender cult anymore. And I'll listen to you. A lot of people have evolutions. I will listen to you. Right now, I think you're just saying what you think you need to say to be popular with Bill Maher's audience.
Picture this. A beloved Hollywood actress, known for her bubbly charm, suddenly finds herself under fire. The target? Drew Barrymore. The reason? Her sudden shift in tone when it comes to politics and culture. For years, Drew was seen as part of the machine, pushing woke ideas into the mainstream. She cheered them on, gave them airtime, and leaned into the trend. But when she recently sat across from Bill Maher, she started speaking as if free expression was under attack, and it was somehow too dangerous to share real opinions. That's when the backlash hit hard. Critics were quick to point out the double standard. How can someone who once celebrated every corner of progressive ideology suddenly act like she's the victim of censorship? To them, it wasn't growth, it wasn't reflection, it was pure hypocrisy. And the attacks weren't subtle either. She was accused of bending to whichever audience she faced, saying whatever she thought would keep her popular in the moment. That's why her past actions became ammunition. The kneeling in front of Dylan Mulvaney, the gushy Kamala Harris interview, all of it came rushing back.
He had on Drew Barrymore, this again on the podcast, and listen to what she said in SOT 28.
You have a lot of bravado about what you think is the truth or not, but it's just so refreshing. Like, you were doing this before it was so dangerous.
Still dangerous.
And it is just way too dangerous now,
Yeah.
but you're still doing it.
It's slightly less dangerous than it was 2 years ago because we did have a vibe change. And because the Democrats lost so badly in 2024, the blush is off the rose on left-wing censorship and, oh my God, you can't say that. Stop telling me what I can do, what I can say, what I can think, who my heroes are supposed to be. Just get off of me.
And right at the center of the storm stood Drew Barrymore, her reputation shaking under the weight of this contradiction. By the way, before we continue, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us grow and share more intriguing stories. Now, let's continue. When Drew sat down with Bill Maher, the moment was supposed to feel candid, open, and raw. Instead, it turned into what many people saw as a disaster. She tried to nod along with Bill's sharp takes about free speech and censorship, but the more she spoke, the more it sounded like she was trying too hard to impress him. Critics didn't buy it. They said it wasn't Drew speaking from the heart, it was Drew putting on another mask, trying to win over an audience that's tired of woke narratives. The internet lit up instantly. Clips of the interview spread like wildfire, with people mocking her expressions and awkward comments. Social media didn't hold back, calling it fake, embarrassing, even desperate, and the timing couldn't have been worse. Drew's reputation was already shaky after her overly affectionate moment with Dylan Mulvaney and that fawning interview with Kamala Harris. Sitting across from Maher, she looked like she was trying to backpedal on everything she had once promoted, and it only made her look less authentic.
He's saying what he's always said, to his credit. He's been very consistent. But there you have Drew Barrymore talking about how it's still too dangerous to speak out with your real opinions. So what are her real opinions? Because just like Jimmy Kimmel and Sarah Silverman, she's been fueling the fire of wokeism for years. Who could forget how she humiliated herself next to fake quote unquote woman, meaning a man, Dylan Mulvaney, who came on her show and was treated like Jesus.
What stung even more was the sharp comparison between her and Bill Maher himself. Bill has been consistent for years, criticizing both the left and the right when he felt like it. Drew, on the other hand, came off as someone who shifts, depending on who's in the room. That's why this interview is remembered less as an open conversation and more as a public relations nightmare that added gasoline to the fire already surrounding her. Bill Maher's comments during that conversation hit a nerve because he pointed out something many Americans have been whispering for years. He said that under Trump, people could speak their minds without instantly being destroyed, but under Biden, every word felt like walking through a minefield. One wrong phrase, one joke taken the wrong way, and your career could go up in flames. And he wasn't exaggerating. People really did lose jobs they had built over decades. Entire careers vanished overnight because of a single post, a single sentence, a single moment caught on camera. It wasn't just censorship, it felt like social execution. Families torn apart, reputations ruined, livelihoods gone. Maher didn't say this as a Trump supporter, he's never been one, but in that moment he admitted a truth that millions of people had already felt deep down. The atmosphere of fear under Biden's America was suffocating. Now contrast that with Drew Barrymore sitting across from him. While Bill spoke with consistency, she looked uncomfortable, fumbling, and vague. She talked about how dangerous it still felt to speak openly, but critics asked, dangerous for who? Drew had always been safe when she parroted the approved narrative. She was never canceled for kneeling before Dylan Mulvaney or fawning over Kamala Harris. It was other people, outside the Hollywood bubble, who paid the price. And that hypocrisy made her words ring hollow.
Leftists need to learn the number one lesson of being happy in life. Do not lean into your problems. Don't lean into crazy. Everyone's had crazy in their lives. The successful, sane ones do not obsess over it, do not want to relive it over and over, do not want to talk about it night and day on their show, do not talk about things like the ground feels safe to me, and they certainly do not literally bend the knee to the cult of transgenderism, Drew, and then talk about how, gee, it feels so dangerous. It's so dangerous, still too dangerous to say how you really feel. About what? What is it? Do you have a reversal on that issue?
And that's exactly where the hypocrisy became impossible to ignore. Drew Barrymore never complained when the left was running the show, when people were being canceled left and right for stepping even slightly out of line. Back then, she was happily sipping the progressive Kool-Aid, nodding along, and giving her stage to whoever fit the narrative. But now, when the cultural tide has turned and more Americans are pushing back against woke politics, suddenly Drew is worried. Suddenly, she says it's too dangerous to speak freely. Critics weren't fooled. They saw it as convenient timing, not personal growth. If Drew really believed it was dangerous, why didn't she say a word during the years when careers were destroyed for wrongthink? Why didn't she use her national platform to defend the people who lost everything over a tweet or a comment? Instead, she was cheerleading the same ideology that made the environment toxic. This double standard is why people feel her recent comments are nothing more than survival tactics. She's not leading any cultural shift. She's clinging to relevance while the rest of the country has already started mocking the very ideas she once celebrated. And as critics see it, that's the real threat to Drew Barrymore. Not censorship, not danger just being exposed as someone who followed the trend when it was popular and now wants out without owning up to her role in creating the problem. One of the most glaring examples people brought up was Drew's infamous interview with Dylan Mulvaney. Viewers couldn't forget the moment she literally dropped to her knees in front of him, treating him like some kind of spiritual figure.
Take a risk. You're in a safe space with Bill. Maybe he should have gotten her down on the floor, and she would have said how she really felt. You continuously vote for the party and the people who push that bullshit on us. You, madam, are complicit. You hosted Kamala Harris, who says, we all need to be woke. We need to be woke because we just do. That's your person who you actually had on your program and wanted us to call Mama La.
It wasn't just awkward, it became the poster image of Hollywood's blind devotion to woke culture. Critics blasted her for humiliating herself, saying it wasn't about respect or kindness, it was about putting on a performance for the cameras. That interview stuck to her like glue. Every time Drew tries to speak about free expression or how dangerous it feels to share real opinions, the clip resurfaces. People ask, if it's so dangerous, then why was she bending the knee and celebrating a man who became famous by branding himself as a symbol of progressive politics? To critics, it showed that Drew wasn't interested in free thought at all. She was interested in aligning with whatever gave her applause in the moment. And it didn't stop there. That same pattern played out when she welcomed Kamala Harris onto her show. Drew didn't act like a tough interviewer, she acted like a fangirl. Instead of pushing for answers, she giggled, gushed, and called Kamala Mamala, as if America needed a political mom to tuck everyone in at night.
We lift each other up, we all rise with the mouth quivering, just like the hideous to Dylan. Where do you find the strength to keep being the joy? Where do you find the strength to keep being the joy? Oh my God, she's too far gone. This is what happens when you become a Hollywood actress as a child. You lose your id. You don't know who you are. You're just floating. You're like the Martian, the astronaut disconnected from the spaceship. You're just adrift in space, untethered. You don't know who you are. Where do you find the strength to keep being the joy?
To many, it was embarrassing, a cringe-worthy performance that turned her show into a campaign ad rather than a genuine conversation. That Kamala Harris interview became one of the low points of Drew's career as a host. Instead of asking real questions, she melted into admiration, her voice quivering as she praised Kamala with lines like, "Where do you find the strength to keep being the joy?" It sounded less like a journalist speaking to a politician and more like a starstruck fan worshiping her idol. Viewers cringed at how one-sided it felt. Kamala didn't have to defend her policies or face any tough challenges. She was handed a soft pillow and treated like America's comforting mother figure. But the cracks eventually started to show. People began realizing those glossy promises from the Democratic playbook weren't matching reality. The cheerful slogans, the endless talk of lifting each other up, it all sounded good on TV. But in the real world, the problems kept piling up. For Drew, the disconnect became obvious. She had sold her audience a shiny picture of politics, only to watch the enthusiasm fade when the results didn't match the hype. Critics argue this is why she looks so lost now. She hitched her reputation to a political fantasy, and when it collapsed, she didn't know how to pull back gracefully. Instead, she stumbled into Bill Maher's studio, trying to sound cautious and concerned, but only reminding everyone of her past fawning interviews that had already made her credibility shaky. And this is where people started digging deeper into Drew's past, pointing out how her entire life in Hollywood shaped the way she behaves today. From the time she was a child, she was thrust into the spotlight, pushed onto red carpets, and introduced to adult habits way too young.
Okay, he's a sick person, Dylan Mulvaney. He, I believe, may have had his penis chopped off. He's taking massive amounts of hormones. He's pretending that he is something other than what he is. And I believe, and many others believe too, because he really wants to be famous. He's been wanting to be famous for many, many years. He wasn't able to make it as a man, or a gay man, or a non-binary man, and now has gone full Eloise. And that's something that you think is brave, and you celebrated it openly on your show and told others that they should too.
By the time most kids were worried about homework, Drew was already surrounded by fame, drugs, and constant attention. That kind of upbringing leaves scars. It creates adults who are always performing, always searching for approval, and often disconnected from reality. Critics say that's exactly what we see in Drew today. Someone who never really developed a strong sense of identity outside of the cameras. She floats from one role to another, not just on screen but in real life, shifting her beliefs depending on who's in front of her. This isn't unique to Drew either. Hollywood has a long list of child stars who ended up spiraling: Lindsay Lohan, Selena Gomez, Ariana Grande, and many more who struggled under the same pressure. The industry is ruthless, and by the time the damage is clear, it's often too late to undo it. For Drew, people argue that her awkward interviews and political missteps aren't just random mistakes. They're the result of decades of conditioning, of always trying to please, and never really knowing where she stands when the applause dies down. The Dylan Mulvaney situation only added fuel to that fire. Critics didn't just call the interview embarrassing, they called it dangerous. They argued that by celebrating Dylan so openly, Drew was elevating someone who, in their view, was chasing fame rather than living authentically.
May. Oh my God, this woman has a national platform where she's passing on this craziness to God knows how many viewers. And then we all need a mom? Like, how crazy is that? No, we don't. No, we don't. We all had a mom, believe it or not. Some were good, some weren't great, some were amazing. I'm lucky enough to be in that category. I certainly don't need my politician to be my mom, okay? Not at all. We joke about Trump being daddy because that NATO Secretary General referred to him as such. And it's sort of a joke, like dad's home. He's not actually our dad. And by the way, I lost my dad when I was young. Never have I actually thought Trump was my daddy. And Kamala is not our mommy. Now I realize Drew Barrymore has an effed up mom who put her into the spotlight at this young age and let her do drugs and drink when she was, I think, in the single digits or like 12 at the oldest.
Dylan's story was framed as bravery, but detractors claimed it was really a performance designed for sponsorships, clicks, and constant attention. They pointed out how Dylan had struggled to break into entertainment before, trying different labels, gay man, non-binary identity, and only after fully embracing a transgender persona did the spotlight come rushing in. To Drew, that was worth kneeling for. To her critics, it was proof that she was propping up someone they saw as exploiting a cultural trend. And this is where the bigger question came in. Was Drew supporting a real movement, or just giving her platform to people who knew how to play the system? For critics, the answer was obvious. Dylan became a symbol of how identity could be turned into a brand, and Drew became the Hollywood host who clapped the loudest. Every time that clip resurfaces, it's used as proof that Drew isn't a thoughtful interviewer. She's a promoter of whatever ideology looks shiny in the moment, no matter how controversial it really is. Things got even stranger when Drew started using language that made her look completely detached from reality. On her show, she talked about how we all need a mom, and treated politicians like Kamala Harris as if they were caretakers instead of leaders. Critics were stunned. They reminded everyone that Americans don't need a political parent, they need real leadership, people who can handle the economy, protect freedoms, and actually solve problems. Meanwhile, Drew was presenting Kamala like she was some comforting figure to guide the nation, blurring the line between politics and personal therapy. And it wasn't just Kamala. This kind of talk fueled the running joke of calling Trump Daddy, a nickname that started as humor after a NATO Secretary General once referred to him that way. But here's the difference. Even with Trump, it was always understood as a joke. No one actually believed he was a father figure. Drew, on the other hand, sounded dead serious. She really wanted Kamala to be seen as Mamala, America's mom. To critics, this showed how warped her worldview had become. Instead of looking at politicians as public servants who should deliver results, she treated them as personal saviors. That, they argued, wasn't just cringe, it was proof that Drew had lost touch with what leadership is supposed to mean. And in their eyes, it all traced back to her Hollywood upbringing and the way she was conditioned to see life through fantasy rather than reality. By this point, Drew's critics weren't just laughing at her, they were calling her complicit. She was the one giving platforms to politicians like Kamala Harris, who openly said America needs to be woke. She was the one cheering on Dylan Mulvaney and treating him like a cultural hero. And now, after years of fueling that fire, she suddenly sits with Bill Maher and talks about how dangerous it feels to share real opinions. For many, that was the breaking point. The anger came from the sheer hypocrisy. If Drew truly had a change of heart, critics said she should own it. She should admit she had been wrong, explain what opened her eyes, and be honest about her new stance. People can respect growth, even dramatic change, but what they can't respect is someone who quietly flips sides without ever acknowledging the damage they helped cause. And that's exactly what they accused Drew of doing, trying to slip out of the woke bubble without taking any responsibility for being one of the people who helped build it. This is why her appearance on Bill Maher's show came off as so fake. Instead of showing strength or conviction, she looked like she was just trying to survive the conversation, offering vague lines about fear and danger, as if that would make her sound thoughtful. But the reality was clear. If she has truly changed, she needs to say it outright. Otherwise, critics argue, she's only pretending performing for the crowd, just like she's done her whole life. And when you really look at that interview, it's hard not to see it as pure performance. Drew wasn't speaking like someone who had gone through a real transformation. She was speaking like someone who knew exactly where she was sitting on Bill Maher's turf, a stage where woke talking points get torn apart. So instead of pushing her usual narrative, she adjusted her tone, nodded along, and threw in a few safe comments to sound like she was seeing things differently. But the problem is, people remembered her history. For years, she was one of Hollywood's most reliable progressive voices, always leaning into the narrative, always amplifying it. That's why her sudden shift sounded less like honesty and more like strategy. She wasn't revealing new convictions, she was adapting to the room, playing it safe to avoid embarrassing herself in front of Maher's audience. Critics argued it was an act of survival, not growth, and when you compare her to Maher, the contrast is striking. Maher has built his brand on consistency. He calls out the left, he calls out the right, and he doesn't change depending on who's sitting across from him. Drew, on the other hand, came off as a chameleon, willing to reshape her words to avoid backlash in any situation. And that, more than anything, is why people say her so-called awakening isn't real. It's just another Hollywood performance, tailored for the moment. And Drew's shaky performance wasn't happening in a vacuum. Around the same time, Bill Maher threw shade at other media figures, pointing out how shows like The View and hosts like Joe Scarborough had become some of the worst advertisements for honest discussion. He said outright that the format was broken. People like Whoopi Goldberg and Joe weren't bringing balance. They were fueling the exact kind of partisan noise that turns audiences away. It struck a chord because everyone watching knew what he meant. Whoopi has become infamous for bizarre, off-the-wall comments that even her co-hosts sometimes don't know how to respond to. Joe Scarborough, on the other hand, has built an entire brand out of relentless anti-Trump rants, turning every conversation into a political tantrum. Together, they represent a media culture where performance matters more than truth, where stirring outrage is the goal instead of honest debate. That's why Drew Barrymore's stumble fit right into the bigger picture. Critics saw her not just as one actress fumbling through an interview, but as part of a collapsing Hollywood media machine that's losing the trust of everyday people. When viewers tune in and see politicians treated like celebrities, comedians treated like prophets, and talk show hosts twisting themselves to fit the narrative, they stop believing anything they hear. America doesn't need more theater, it needs real conversations. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Also, drop your thoughts in the comments. See you on the next one.